Bailame como si fuera la última vez y enséñame ese pasito que no sé, un besito bien suavecito, bebé. Aquí, 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 aquí. क्या गाना है समय के लिए घरों में कहीं तो पैसा थैंक यू सो मच आजन म्यूट कर दिया उनको अस्सलाम वालेकुम. So we are going to start with liver and biliary tract. As all of you know, Professor Tahir has taken the liver function test and also told you the excretory and secretory functions of the liver. So I am going to do with the rest of the pathology of the liver, starting with acute and chronic liver failure. So as all of you know, I don't need to repeat it, but still I thought I'll give you a background. As all of you know, the liver weighs 1400 to 1600 grams, the normal in a normal adult, and it has a dual blood supply. 60 to 70% of the blood of the liver comes from the portal vein, and 30 to 40% comes from the hepatic artery. Portal vein and hepatic artery, they enter the liver through the porta hepatis. All of you know that. Porta hepatis, which is present at the inferior aspect of the liver. So branches of portal vein and hepatic artery and bile duct, they run parallel with each other and they are present in the portal tract. So in the portal tract, you're going to see three things: hepatic artery, portal vein, and bile duct. So, and we can see anatomically, liver is divided into lobules, which are 1 to 2 millimeter, and they are oriented around the terminal tributaries of the hepatic vein with portal tracts at the lobule of the periphery. So if you see, these are the zones of the liver. This is one lobule of the liver. It is surrounded by thin fibrous connective tissue septa. And you can see these hepatocytes, they are in columns. In between the hepatocytes, you can see these are the sinusoids. Sinusoids are lined by fenestrated endothelial cells. Fenestrated endothelial cells mean that there are gaps present in between the endothelium, which is for the transportation of the nutrients. When there is, because liver, all of you know, has a metabolic function. So these hepatocytes are arranged around the central vein, and then you can see a portal tract. This is a portal tract, and at these four ends, there will be four portal tracts. So one portal tract contains portal vein, hepatic artery, and bile duct. These are the branches of portal vein, hepatic artery, and bile duct. And liver can be divided into three zones: zone 1, 2, 3, according to perfusion. Zone 1 has got the best perfusion as compared to zone 2, and zone 3 is least perfused because it is away from the hepatic artery. So I hope this normal architecture is, you understand that. So if you see, this is the histological section of the liver showing central vein. This is also central vein. This is a low power view. This is the high power view. These are the sinusoids. What are sinusoids? They are the vascular spaces lined by fenestrated endothelial cells, as I've told you. And this is a portal tract or portal triad, which is composed of blood vessel, hepatic artery, portal vein, and bile duct. And all of these are hepatocytes. This is the portal triad again. So this is also high power view, central vein, hepatocytes, and sinusoids. And you know, between the sinusoids and the hepatocyte, a space of disease present, which contains the myofibroblast cells, which are helpful in the laying down of collagen fibers, but which is in the case of cirrhosis, which I'm going to discuss later. So this is again the normal histology of the liver. This is again normal histology, portal vein, bile duct, and hepatic artery. They are present in the portal triad. So now we are going to do with the liver failure. Liver, as you know, is a very big metabolic organ because you have already had 2 lectures and you have already done the most of the liver function test. So we are going to discuss the pathology of liver one by one. So I'm going to start with acute liver failure, chronic liver failure, portal hypertension, which are 3 components in this lecture, and in the next lecture we'll do the okay. And in the next lecture, we are going to do the hepatitis. So first, we are going to start with the liver failure. Liver failure can be acute liver failure or chronic liver failure. Acute liver failure is a result of sudden and massive liver destruction. Liver is going to be destroyed by certain factors, and the most important one can be acute massive liver necrosis caused by the drugs, and this can be acetoaminophene, which is responsible for 50% of cases of acute liver failure. Other drugs and toxin can also lead to acute liver failure. So in acute liver failure, there is going to be massive destruction of the liver parenchyma. And chronic liver failure, which follows many years and decades of progressive liver injury. This can be because of hepatitis B or hepatitis C infections, or it can be because of other causes as well. It can lead to late stage chronic diseases, or chronic diseases of the liver can lead to chronic liver failure. Acute liver failure is associated with encephalopathy, coagulopathy, which is seen within the 26 weeks of initial injury of the liver and the absence of pre-existing liver disease. So whenever you have to label a patient with acute liver failure, you have to see that there are certain signs and symptoms which are also present in that patient. This can be coagulopathy or encephalopathy, and which should be present within the 26 weeks of starting the illness. And there is no pre-existing liver disease in that patient. The causes, as I've told you, number one is drugs and toxins, and the most important drug is acetaminophen, which is responsible for acute liver failure in 50% of cases. Other causes can be hepatitis A infection and hepatitis B infection. Hepatitis A infection as is caused by the orophycal route, and hepatitis B infections are caused by the parenteral route. Both these hepatitis can be cured, but sometimes they are very aggressive and they can lead to massive liver necrosis with acute liver failure. Another cause can be autoimmune hepatitis. It accounts for 50% of cases of liver failure, acute liver failure. So autoimmune hepatitis, you all of know, is autoimmune diseases are those diseases in which the antibodies are formed against your own self-antigen. So in case of acute autoimmune hepatitis, antibodies are formed against the liver parenchyma. Next causes can be in Asia, acute infections by hepatitis E and hepatitis B also predominate for the acute liver failure. Other viruses which are human immunodeficiency virus, which causes AIDS, HIV virus, cytomegalovirus, they can also lead to acute liver failure. So the causes can be drugs and toxins. The most important drug is acetaminophen. The acute infections by hepatitis A and B, autoimmune hepatitis, and cytomegalovirus and HIV infections can also lead to acute liver failure. So these are the causes of acute liver failure. Now we are going to see the morphology. Initially, when there is liver failure starts, the liver is going to be enlarged, but later on it will be shrunken in size. The liver is going to shrink in size. Instead of larger, it will be smaller in size. Broad region of parenchymal loss surrounding by regenerating hepatocytes can be seen with ductular reaction, which depends upon the nature of ductular reaction and ductular insult. So this means that whenever there is acute liver failure, large areas of hepatocyte will show degeneration. And in the surrounding tissue, you can see regenerating hepatocyte, because liver has a capacity of regenerating itself whenever there is going to be a liver infection. So regeneration is not going to be that much marked as compared to necrosis of the hepatocyte. So this can lead to acute liver failure in later stages. Toxic injury by acetaminophen takes hours to develop, and it can be there is a brief period in which fibrosis do not develop. So for fibrosis to occur in a liver, at least we have to have a longer period of time for the development of fibrosis, which is known as the case of liver. It is called cirrhosis as well, which I am going to explain it to you in the later lectures. So in the acute liver failure, what a pathologist is going to see in a liver biopsy is areas of degeneration of liver parenchyma or hepatocytes surrounding by regenerating hepatocyte, and ductular reaction is seen as well. Ductular reaction means that there are formation of many small bile canaliculi or bile ducts. Viral hepatitis, which cause liver failure in weeks to months, some regeneration and fibrosis can be seen. So in case of acetaminophen, which is causing acute liver damage, you do not see any fibrosis. But in case of viral hepatitis, fibrosis can be seen in the acute liver failure as well. Diffuse microvesicular steatosis is seen In the fatty liver of pregnancy or idiosyncratic reaction to toxin. What does it mean? It means that steatosis means fatty change in the liver. In the pregnancy, if there is going to be acute liver failure, there can be fatty change within the hepatocytes which can be present. Or sometimes it can be an idiosyncratic reaction to toxins which are ingested by an individual. So hepatocytes are unable to perform the usual metabolic functions due to mitochondrial dysfunction. In this case, you are going to see fatty change in the liver. I'm going to show you the photomicrographs as well. Immunodeficiency and untreated infections with HIV, transplant, immunosuppression, non-hepatotropic viruses like cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex virus, and adenovirus can also cause fulminant hepatitis. Acute hepatitis, acute liver failure, or fulminant hepatitis is one and the same thing. These infections which are not by the hepatotropic viruses. Hepatotropic viruses are those viruses which has the affinity to infect the liver. So these viruses, which are HIV, cytomegalovirus, and herpes simplex virus, they cause other diseases as well and can also lead to acute viral hepatitis of fulminant type. Fulminant means it is very aggressive type of hepatitis. This is the photomicrograph of acute hepatitis. You can see the liver cells, they are all degenerated. Sorry, excuse me, slide chali gayi. Sorry for the interruption. I'm going to fix it. Slide share nahi aa raha. Okay, so you can see these all hepatocytes, they are all degenerated and these are going to be taken away by the nuclei are also going to be degenerated. This is again the acute liver failure in which you can see degenerated hepatocytes and inflammatory infiltrate is present in between and these nuclei are also going to undergo necrosis. This is the bile ductular reaction. You can see small bile channels. These are lined by cuboidal epithelium. So these are the prominent ductular reaction at the edge of the necrotic region. This is all necrotic region and this is all ductular reaction which is present at the edge of the region. It is also acute liver failure. You can see these are small bile duct formation which are lined by cuboidal epithelial cells. This is again the same photomicrograph. This is hepatic steatosis, a fatty change in the liver. You can see this whole looks like a fat cell. Okay, so these are the nuclei of the hepatocytes which are present and all of the cytoplasm is occupied by the fat. So this is called hepatic steatosis or fatty change in the liver. The other name, simpler name is fatty change in the liver. You have done this fatty change in your general pathology lectures as well. So this is the hepatic steatosis or fatty change in the liver. This is mostly seen in metabolic disorder, also can be seen in pregnancy, and also can be seen in individuals who are obese. Okay, hepatic steatosis can be seen in them as well. And it is also a very big cause of alcoholic liver disease, which we are going to discuss later on. So in the clinical features, in the acute liver failure, the patient is going to have nausea, vomiting, jaundice, followed by life-threatening encephalopathy and coagulopathy. So patient is going to present with nausea, vomiting, and jaundice, which is mostly seen in cases of hepatitis as well. But in that case, encephalopathy and coagulopathy do not develop. But in case of acute liver failure, encephalopathy and coagulopathy develop. Serum transaminases are elevated. Liver is initially enlarged, but later it shrinks in size. Alteration of the bile formation and flow, icterus, yellow sclera, skin, and mucous membrane becomes yellow in color. So it means that bile formation becomes altered, and icterus is that jaundice stage is seen. The sclera of the eye becomes yellow in color. Even the skin and mucous membrane becomes yellow. In the hepatic encephalopathy, it ranges from behavioral abnormalities to marked confusion, stupor, coma, and death. Neurological signs are hysterexis. Hysterexis is tremors can be seen in the hands. When you outstretch your hands, those tremors can be seen, and they are mostly because of hepatic encephalopathy. Patient presents with confusion, behavioral changes, and sometimes death occurs in coma. And neurological signs of this hepatic encephalopathy are hysterexis, that is, you can see tremors in the outstretched hands. Coagulopathy. Liver is responsible for synthesis of vitamin K, all of you know that, and it is not dependent on clotting factors. Easily bruisability is an early sign and can lead to life-threatening intracranial hemorrhages. and lead to life-threatening intracranial hemorrhage because of vitamin K deficiency. Liver also removes activated coagulation factor, and loss of this function can lead to disseminated intravascular coagulation. Disseminated intravascular coagulation means you see small blood clots present throughout the circulation. So these can be very dangerous. They can lodge anywhere and they can lead to infarction, or they can lead to even the blood supply is cut off and the patient is going to have the loss of function of that area. So I hope you understand hepatic encephalopathy and coagulopathy. Portal hypertension. Portal hypertension also develops, it arises when there is diminished blood flow through the portal venous system, which occurs because of prehepatic, posthepatic, or intrahepatic levels. So portal hypertension I'm going to discuss in detail in end of this lecture. So the portal hypertension can occur because of prehepatic causes, hepatic causes, or intrahepatic or posthepatic causes. So prehepatic, posthepatic, or intrahepatic causes will lead to portal hypertension. Hepatorenal syndrome. Hepatorenal syndrome is a syndrome which occurs in patients with liver failure and with no renal pathology. Patients do not have any renal pathology underlying, but because of the acute renal failure, acute liver failure, there is going to be renal failure as well. Sodium retention occurs, impaired water excretion occurs, and decreased renal perfusion and glomerular filtration are the main abnormalities seen in hepatorenal syndrome. Rising blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine levels are seen. So, as Professor Tahir has already told you what are the liver function tests, you are going to do the renal function test in which comes the blood urea, nitrogen, creatinine. And this we are going to discuss when we are going to do the chapter on the kidney or our module of the kidney. So both of rising urea and creatinine are suggestive of renal failure. So if I'm going to repeat the clinical course in the acute liver failure, there is hepatic encephalopathy, there is coagulopathy, portal hypertension, and hepatorenal syndrome. So now we are going to go on to the chronic liver failure. Acute liver failure is, I hope it is clear, I'm just going to quickly go through it again. The causes are toxins and drugs. Acetaminophen is the most important one. Then infections with hepatitis B virus and hepatitis A virus. Then autoimmune hepatitis, hepatitis E and B are most important causes of acute liver failure in Asia. Then HIV and cytomegalovirus. Human immunodeficiency virus and cytomegalovirus are also causes of acute liver failure. Microscopically, I have explained you that there is going to be necrosis with regeneration of the hepatocytes and ductular reaction. Ductular reaction is formation of new small bile ducts which are present at the periphery of the necrotic lobule. And then I told you fibrosis is not going to be seen because the time duration is very short in case of drug toxicity. In case of viral hepatitis, some fibrosis can be seen as well. And then I told you there is microvesicular steatosis, which I explained you is a fatty change in the liver. I've shown you these slides. This is the massive necrosis in the liver. This is also massive necrosis surrounded by acute inflammatory cells. This is the ductular reaction, which I've told you with a lobule with the necrosis. This is also ductular reaction. This is the steatosis or fatty chain. The other name for steatosis is fatty chain in the liver. So clinical course I've told you, and now we are going to do the chronic liver failure. In the chronic liver failure, chronic hepatitis B and C, alcoholic and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, these are the main important causes of chronic liver failure. Liver failure is associated with cirrhosis. So chronic liver failure is always associated with cirrhosis. Chronic hepatitis B viral infection and chronic hepatitis C viral infection are the most important causes of chronic liver failure in our part of the world. Alcoholic liver disease is also an important factor in the Western world, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is seen in those individuals who have metabolic disorders, who are suffering from obesity, or who are suffering from diabetes mellitus as well. Cirrhosis is a condition which is marked by diffuse transformation of entire liver into regenerative parenchymal nodules surrounded by fibrous bands and vascular shunting. It means that the normal liver architecture is going to be destroyed and there is going to be large fibrous tissue bands which are going to enclose the hepatocytes. So the normal vascular supply which is present in the liver is going to be obstructed and fibrous bands are produced, and there is going to be vascular shunting, which is very devastating effects on the individual. Child-Pugh classification of cirrhosis of the liver is, there are three classes: Class A, Class B, Class C. Class A is well compensated, Class B is partially decompensated, and Class C is totally decompensated. So we are going to discuss it when we will do cirrhosis as well. Morphologically, in chronic liver failure, cirrhosis occurs diffusely with formation of fibrous and regenerating nodules. Morphology of cirrhosis varies with the cause. Prognosis depends upon the classification, as I told you. So some of them are well compensated, some are partially decompensated, and some are totally decompensated. Well compensated are those in which the individual is not going to feel any signs and symptoms of liver failure, while in partially decompensated, there will be signs and symptoms of liver failure, and in totally decompensated, the patient is a full-blown case of chronic liver failure. Prognosis depends upon the classification. Stem cell activation is seen in ductular reaction and cirrhosis. Ductular reaction increases with advancing stage of the disease and usually prominent in cirrhosis. It means that the bile ducts which are formed in the acute liver failure as well, they are also going to be formed in a chronic liver failure, and as the stage of the disease advances, the ducts are more prominently developed in that. Regression of fibrosis is very uncommon, which occurs rarely. With new treatment, fibrosis becomes thin and fragmented. As fibrous septa break apart, adjacent nodules of regenerating parenchyma join. Cirrhotic livers show elements of progression and regression. So, in the case of cirrhosis of the liver, you can see fibrous tissue septa which are surrounding the normal hepatocytes. I will show you the slide as well now, so it becomes clear. This is the cirrhotic liver. You can see broad bands of fibrous tissue. These are broad bands of fibrous tissue, and this is, they are surrounding the lobule of the liver. Now you do not see any portal tract which you were seeing in the normal liver, and they are not thin septa. And because of this thin septa, the blood flow is going to be obstructed in the liver. So regression of fibrosis is very uncommon. Sometimes it does occur with new treatment, then these nodules can join together. So in cirrhotic liver, you can see both progression and regression of fibrosis. This is a chronic liver failure. You can see the hepatocytes which are all destroyed, and you can see inflammatory infiltrate present, and these central veins are also showing congestive changes. This is also the end stage of chronic liver failure. You cannot see any hepatocyte or ductular reaction with chronic lymphocytic infiltrate is present, and this is also a duct. This is also the end stage or the liver damage. This is again cirrhotic liver, the one I showed you earlier. A lobule which is composed of regenerating hepatocytes surrounded by thick band of fibrosis. The clinical feature of chronic liver failure, 40% of patients, they do not have symptoms until the stage becomes advanced. Non-specific symptoms occur like anorexia, weight loss, weakness can be seen. Hepatic encephalopathy, jaundice, coagulopathy, bleeding from esophageal varices, and bacterial infections are the terminal events. Cause of the death are same as of acute liver failure, and in some chronic liver diseases, progression to hepatocellular carcinoma is seen as well. So especially in the chronic liver failure, which is because of hepatitis B viral infection and C viral infection, they can lead to hepatocellular carcinoma, which is a malignant tumor of the liver, which we are going to discuss as we are going to discuss the pathology of liver one by one. So the symptoms are like encephalopathy, jaundice, coagulopathy, bleeding from esophageal varices, bacterial infection. They are the terminal events. Causes of death can be bleeding or suppurated acute renal failure as well. And sometimes in chronic liver failure, cirrhosis can lead to hepatocellular carcinoma or HCC. So esophageal varices, I'm going to explain to you. Esophageal varices are the formation of collateral blood vessel channels which are formed because of the portal blood flow shunting, and they are blood vessels which are formed around the esophageal end of the stomach, and they can bleed and they can have massive bleeding, sometimes leading to shock, and patient can die because of that. So I'm going to explain it one by one when I'm going to do portal hypertension. Okay. So I hope chronic liver failure is clear to you. As I've told you, I'm again going to repeat it. Chronic liver failure is because of hepatitis B and hepatitis C viral infection when it becomes chronic, alcoholic liver disease, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it is associated with cirrhosis. Child-Pugh classification of cirrhosis is that we have three stages of cirrhosis. class A, class B, and C. Class A is well compensated, B is partially compensated, and class C is totally decompensated. So then I told you the morphology in which there is going to be cirrhosis with regeneration of the nodules. And I've told you, shown you these photomicrographs as well. And symptoms are, I've told you, like hepatic encephalopathy, jaundice, coagulopathy, and sometimes hepatocellular carcinoma is seen. In those individuals in which the infection is because of hepatitis B, C, viral infection leading to chronic liver disease, and sometimes alcoholic liver disease leading to cirrhosis can also lead to hepatocellular carcinoma. Additional symptoms which can be seen in chronic liver disease are pruritus. Pruritus is itching of the skin which can be very severe and it can lead to skin infection and raw skin. Hyperestrogenemia. Hyperestrogenemia means increase in estrogen level, especially if it is present in the male, it can give rise to paler erythema, Palmer erythema, spider nevi or spider angiomas, hypogonadism and gynecomastia. It means if this is present and hyperestrogen level is present in male, the palms become red in color. Spider angiomatas are small blood vessels which are present on the skin area. Hypogonadism means that their testosterone level is going to go down, and gynecomastia, they can develop breast as well because of the increased estrogen level in them. Hypogonadism is also seen in females due to disruption of hypothalamic pituitary axis function as well. So these are the additional symptoms, pruritus and hypoestrogenemia. Increased resistance to portal. So next we are going to, chronic liver failure I have done. So in the end, I'm going to ask you questions. Next is the portal hypertension. Portal hypertension. Increased resistance to portal blood flow develops. It can be divided into prehepatic causes, intrahepatic causes, or posthepatic causes. Prehepatic causes of portal hypertension conditions. These are because of obstruction, thrombosis, narrowing of the portal vein before it ramifies into the liver, or massive splenomegaly with increased splenic vein blood flow. So portal hypertension, as I've told you earlier, as well can be caused because of the prehepatic causes, intrahepatic causes, and posthepatic causes. Prehepatic causes are those which are present before the portal vein enters into the liver. This can be obstruction because of thrombosis, narrowing of the portal vein before it ramifies into the liver, or massive splenomegaly means the spleen size is going to be increased a lot in size, which will lead to increase in splenic vein blood flow. Posthepatic causes are severe right-sided heart failure, constrictive pericarditis, and hepatic vein outflow obstruction. So in posthepatic causes are those which after portal vein leaves the liver, the portal blood flow is not going to be returned to the right side of the heart because of several factors. Number one can be right-sided heart failure, constrictive pericarditis. Constrictive pericarditis you have done when there is pericardial inflammation, the pericardium becomes adherent to the heart and which will lead to decrease in expansion of the heart leads to constrictive pericarditis. In hepatic vein obstruction outflow is another cause for the post-hepatic cause of the portal hypertension. Intrahepatic causes. The dominant intrahepatic cause of the portal hypertension is cirrhosis of the liver. As I've told you, the cirrhosis of the liver is going to completely disrupt the normal parenchyma of the liver, and the normal blood flow is not going to be there. There are collateral circulations have to be developed for the blood to go back into the right side of the heart. So number one cause and most important cause is cirrhosis. The other intrahepatic cause can be schistosomosis. This is a parasitic infection which can lead to blockage of the portal vein. Massive fatty chain can also lead to changes in the portal blood flow. Diffuse fibrosing granulomatous diseases like sarcoidosis, nodular regenerative hyperplasia affecting microcirculation. So these all causes can lead to intrahepatic causes of portal hypertension, but the most important is cirrhosis again. Other causes are schistosomosis, massive fatty liver chain, diffuse fibrosing granulomatous diseases like sarcoidosis, and nodular regenerative hyperplasia affecting microcirculation. Increased resistance to portal flow at the level of sinusoid is caused by contraction of the vascular smooth muscle cells and the myofibroblast, and disruption of blood flow by scarring and formation of parenchymal nodules. So this means that cirrhosis is one of the leading cause of portal hypertension. The other causes are sarcoidosis, nodular regeneration, and diffuse granulomatous inflammation like sarcoidosis, and there can be resistant to the blood flow in the sinusoids of the liver. Sinusoids are the spaces which are present in between the hepatocyte, as I explained you in the normal histology. And they can also lead to obstruction into the blood flow. So for portal hypertension, we have pre-hepatic causes, post-hepatic causes, and intrahepatic causes. These can be your Viva question as well when you are doing the Viva in your final exam. So alteration in the sinusoidal endothelial cells that contribute to the intrahepatic vasoconstriction associated with portal hypertension include decrease in the nitric oxide production, increased release of endothelin 1, angiotensinogen, and echonosoids. इसका क्या मतलब है? इसका ये मतलब है, you have studied all this in your general pathology as well. I'm going to explain it again. The endothelial cells, they are going to be, their tension increases when the endothelium increases, and they are relaxed when there is nitric oxide present. So if there is decrease in the nitric oxide and increase in the endothelium, the sinusoids are going to be constricted. Constriction will lead to increase in the portal blood flow and leading to portal hypertension. Number two, sinusoidal remodeling and anastomosis between the arterial and portal system in the fibrous tissue septa also contribute to portal hypertension and low pressure portal venous system. So when there is sinusoidal remodeling, which occurs in the cases of cirrhosis of the liver, and the anastomosis develop between the arterial and portal system. So this will also increases the pressure in the portal vein, leading to increase in pressure. Actually, portal venous system is a low pressure system, but when it combines with the arterial system because of anastomosis in the remodeling of the liver, this can lead to increased pressure in the portal vein, leading to portal hypertension. So we have, again, I'm going to explain prehepatic causes, posthepatic causes, then intrahepatic causes, which I've explained you earlier, and there are then sinusoidal causes. Sinusoidal causes can be increase in the endothelium and decrease in nitric oxide, or can be because of arterial and portal system remodeling and anastomosis. Okay, I hope all these are clear. So sinusoidal remodeling and intrahepatic shunts also interfere with the metabolic exchange between sinusoid blood and hepatocytes. Another major factor in the development of portal hypertension is increase in the portal venous blood flow resulting from hyperdynamic circulation. This is caused by vasodilatation in the splanchnic circulation. This means that when there is decreased vasodilatation in the splanchnic circulation, this increased blood is going to be shunted to the portal vein, and portal hypertension can be seen in these cases as well. Tumor necrosis factor and prostacyclines are implicated in causing splanchnic vasodilatation. Nitric oxide also has a role. So the other factors which will lead to portal hypertension, which is present in the intrahepatic causes, as I told you, number one is cirrhosis, number two is schistosomosis, number three is massive fatty chain, number four can be diffuse fibrosing granulomatous inflammation, and number five is portal flow at the level of sinusoid because of the sinusoidal contraction can lead to portal hypertension. Then there is alteration in sinusoidal endothelial cells, which can be considered as number six, and sinusoidal remodeling and anastomosis between the arterial and venous system is also very important in leading to portal hypertension in case of cirrhosis. Sinusoidal remodeling can also put a pressure in the metabolic exchange between the blood and hepatocytes. An increase in venous flow in the portal circulation is also seen when there is dilatation in the splanchnic circulation. So these are the causes for portal hypertension. So now we are going to see what are the effects which are going to be produced in the portal hypertension. Number one is ascites. Number two is post-synaptic shunts. Number three is splenomegaly. And number four is hepatic encephalopathy. So what is ascites? Ascites is the accumulation of excess fluid into the peritoneal cavity. It is called ascites. You are going to see these ascitic patients in your medical wards as well. When the fluid accumulation becomes more than 500 milliliter in the abdomen, it is called ascites. It is mostly serous fluid. Protein is less than 3 grams. Mesothelial cells, few mononuclear cells, WBCs may be present in the ascitic fluid. And if neutrophils are present in abundance, it is because of the infection within the abdominal cavity. And if we see RBCs or malignant cells, then it can be because of the cancer, the ascites is produced, then it is not because of the portal hypertension. Seepage of peritoneal fluid through the lymphatics can lead to hydrothorax as well, mostly on the right side. Hydrothorax means collection of fluid into the thoracic cavity between the lung and the uh, dura as well. So hydrothorax can be present in these individuals as well. So ascites, pathogenesis of ascites is complex, involving the following mechanism: sinusoidal hypertension, driving fluid into the space of Descemet from where it is removed by hepatic lymphatics, and this is because of the decrease in albumin or hypoalbuminemia. Number two, percolation of hepatic lymph in the peritoneal cavity. Normal hepatic duct flow is between 800 to 1000 milliliter of fluid per day, but in case of ascites, it leads to 20 liter per day, and it is beyond the capacity of hepatic duct to absorb, so leading to ascites. Splanchnic vasodilatation and hyperdynamic circulation. Whenever there is hyperdynamic circulation, it means the quantity of blood is going to be increased in the circulation. Postsynaptic shunts. Number two is postsynaptic shunt. So number one, I'm going to explain again. Ascites is increase in the abdominal fluid, which is more than 500 mil. And when you do the microscopic examination, this is going to be few mesothelial cells present, few mononuclear cells, which are WBCs. And if we see a lot of neutrophils, then we should label it as a infective process. And if we see malignant cell, then this ascites is because of the malignancy and not portal hypertension. Okay, and these are the causes of ascites because of the sinusoidal hypertension or increase in the splanchnic blood flow, or it is because of the increase in the normal hepatic duct lymph flow, which is normal 800 to 1000. It increases to 20 liters. It can also lead to ascites. Number two is postsynaptic shunts. What are postsynaptic shunts? These are the dilated blood vessels which can be present around the esophagus, or they can be present around the rectum, which can be called like hemorrhoids. They manifest like hemorrhoids, but they are not actually hemorrhoids. So post-synaptic cells, when they arise in the portal systemic pressure, flow is reversed from portal to systemic circulation by the dilatation of the collateral blood vessels and the development of new blood vessels. So venous bypasses develop where systemic and portal circulation share common capillary beds. Principal sites are veins around and within the rectum, which manifest as hemorrhoids. The esophageal junction produces varices, retroperitoneum and falciform ligament of the liver involving periumbilical and abdominal wall collaterals. So the bypasses, venous bypasses develop whenever there is systemic and portal circulations are joining together. Mostly these are seen around the rectum, and they can manifest like rectal bleeding as hemorrhoids, but they are actually not hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids are what I've told you in the last lecture, or maybe I think I've just loaded that lecture up. Hemorrhoids are dilated blood vessels which are present within the rectal mucosa. So they bleed. But these manifest like hemorrhoids, but they are actually collateral vessels around the rectum, which are taking the portal circulation into the capillary beds. Number two, at the esophageal junction, they can also develop varices. Varices can also develop in the retroperitoneum and at the falciform ligament of the liver. And these varices are mostly seen around the umbilicus and abdominal wall collaterals. Okay. Esophageal varices are seen in 40% of cases with advanced liver cirrhosis, and they can cause massive hematemesis. Hematemesis is blood in the vomiting. Abdominal wall collaterals appear as dilated subcutaneous veins extended from umbilicus towards the rib margin. They are known as caput medusae, which is an important hallmark of the portal hypertension. Splenomegaly is also increase in the spleen sizes seen in the cases of portal hypertension and hepatopulmonary syndrome. What is this? It is seen in 30% of patients with liver cirrhosis and portal hypertension. This leads to intrapulmonary vasodilatation involving capillary and precapillary vessels up to 100 micrometer in size. The blood flow rapidly giving inadequate time for oxygen diffusion, leading to ventilation perfusion mismatch, and right to left shunting results in hypoxia. So there is going to be hurriedly exchange of the gases, and most of the oxygen is not going to be diffused. This can lead to hypoxia, and because of the right to left shunting of the blood. Portopulmonary hypertension refers to pulmonary hypertension occurring in liver disease with portal hypertension and may be due to excessive pulmonary vasoconstriction and vascular remodeling. Clinical manifestation are dyspnea and clubbing of finger. Okay, acute and chronic liver failure can develop as well if the acute liver failure is going to be superadded on chronic disease. Okay, so the signs and symptoms is hepatic encephalopathy, malnutrition, skin spider angiomata. These are the angiomata which can be seen as small blood vessels on the skin. These are the esophageal varices which are shunting of the blood from the systemic to portal circulation, from portal to systemic circulation, and these are dilated blood vessels around the esophageal end of the stomach, and they can bleed and lead to hematemesis. Portal vein hypertension can be seen, and these are periumbilical caput medusae. Dilated veins which are present around the umbilicus are known as periumbilical caput medusae. And these are spider angiomata. Hemorrhoids, these are not actually hemorrhoids, they are collateral circulation in the rectum. Testicular atrophy can be seen. So these are the clinical consequences of portal hypertension. So I'm going to unmute now. If there are any questions, you can ask me now. Unmute kar de. Thank you so much. I hope you understand anything. If there is anything you don't understand, you can, I can explain it later as well. एक मिनट के लिए अनम्यूट कर देना. Any questions, students? You can raise your hands now. Any questions?
अस्सलाम वालेकुम मैम.
वालेकुम सलाम.
मैम एक्यूट जो हेपेटिक फेलियर है उसमें आपने इंसेफेलोपैथी बताई, वो दोबारा एक्सप्लेन कर दें.
Encephalopathy is that metabolic effects are seen on the brain, and there is going to be manifest like tremors in the hands of the outstretched hand, and this encephalopathy can also lead to coma, and patient can die in coma as well. Okay, and this is because of the metabolic effects on the which can lead to hepatic encephalopathy. Anything else? Okay, so I'll see you on Monday now. Okay.